Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and welcome to our Endgame build meta snapshot for 3.17. In this video, we're going to be going over the top builds that the top players are playing, as well as some of the freshest ideas that are coming to the forefront for your Endgame build needs. So if you're looking for a really big powerhouse to move towards, put your currency towards, or you're looking for a second character to move and kind of progress towards, this is the video for you. So we've got a ton of builds to go over, but first, if you're not already and you like these kind of videos, make sure to subscribe and chuck this video a like. But without further ado, let's dive into it. Okay, so right at the start here, we've got some fresh meat, as well as a few, not new arrivals, but arrivals that got some new toys. I don't consider these the strongest build of the league, but they've certainly got their niche and they're pretty damn good at it. First on the list is Herald of Thunder Autobomber. Okay, so Herald of Thunder Autobomber is a pretty damn strong build. Overall, it's got some pretty good damage in the single target department, and it can run around as much as it wants very, very fast and not have any issues to worry about. It's one of the fastest low investment mappers. So if you're just doing, a few scarabs, or you're just running to the boss, or, doing altars, it's one of the best. However, it has traditionally had some defense issues due to the fact it needs to use so many uniques. Well, with the addition of the Annihilating Light and Omniscience, it's gaining a ton of damage as well as a ton of access and ease of itemization towards defense. So overall, most of these builds are using the Impulsor kind of setup here, and they're kind of rocking that. But most of them are now gravitating towards Omniscience, or at least Annihilating Light. Now, both of these items are going to be featured on this list quite a lot. They are both new items, and they're both very, very powerful, and they're sort of best friends. So overall, if you're a self-cast or any sort of an elemental-based build, you should be considering this combo, as they work together just so damn well. Okay, let me give you a bit of a rundown, and then we'll talk about how it applies to Herald of Thunder Autobomber, and then we'll obviously move on. All right, so Herald of Thunder Autobomber, we've talked about its weaknesses, we've talked about some of its strengths. Let's talk about this item combo. So Crystallized Omniscience has featured itself on my channel a few times already, but overall, its purpose is it's going to give you massive damage and massive resistances at the cost of simply stats, a very easily acquirable modifier on gear, as well as your skill tree. It's quite easy to itemize for, and it means that any sort of stat on your gear turns into both defense and offense, meaning it's quite strong and makes it quite easy to craft for. Now, what's cool is that generally, once you get to a certain amount of omniscience, you start to waste resistances due to the fact that, okay, I want the penetration, but I have too much resistance now, so it's kind of diminishing returns. Well, enter Annihilating Light. Annihilating Light basically sacrifices a ton of your resistances, but it gives you triple damage with elemental skills. So Heralds are notoriously hard to scale outside of Herald-specific clusters, as well as their uniques, but Annihilating Light applies to all elemental skills, giving massive boosts to the Herald department, which is pretty nice, and overall, you'll see that as a bit of a theme. People are juicing up their Heralds a lot with this combo. So you're getting a ton of lightning penetration and a ton of lightning damage from this combination of just two uniques, and it also makes itemizing a little bit easier as well. Overall, pretty damn nice. A boost to Herald of Thunder Autobomber. However, it's still just kind of that lower kind of mapping, kind of speed, zoom kind of build. It's not breaking into the Delirium territory, and it's certainly not going to be doing Simulacrums without, dying quite a few times. All right, let's enter another newcomer, a bit of fresh meat here, using a very similar combo, the Annihilating Light and the Crystallized Omniscience. However, this time, this build is using it to juice up Herald of Ice. So the skill in question here is Winter Orb, though. So Winter Orb is one of the premier skills for clearing of the past. However, it fell out of favor when it received a number of nerfs, and then the death knell was when they nerfed the Explode Chest modifier on chest, as well as the Explode modifier on synthesized items. That really did hurt it quite significantly, as it wasn't able to rival some of the big attack-based skills like Tornado Shot, Lightning Arrow, Lightning Strike, and things like that in its clear department, and that's really where it was shining. However, this new combo of Annihilating Light and Omniscience absolutely turbocharged this skill's damage for one, which it was having some issues with in terms of its actual damage after the nerfs, so it solved its single target issues, and in addition to that, it also, because Herald of Ice is an elemental skill, and because it is so difficult to scale, it is now mega juiced with this combo of Annihilating Light and Omniscience. So it's getting a ton of cold penetration and a ton of damage, making this a pseudo replacement for Explode Chest. And when you tune into someone playing this build, you'll notice that when their Herald of Ice goes off, it's gonna nuke everything and chain between all of the packs, assuming it's not an avoid ailments map. Okay, but what makes this combo specifically important and such a good replacement for the Explode Chest is the Socket of Gems have 3.5 crit chance here you can see on these gloves. So this is a craft that can be applied with the Horror Essence 2 gloves at 100% rate, and it synergizes very nicely with the new Eldritch crafting because essences are at, an all-time high in terms of availability, but also in terms of use. You can use these very easily with the new Eldritch crafting, and you're gonna have a great time and make some of the best gloves that you've ever seen with this kind of a combo. And it also further solves the actual massive issue of Herald of Ice kind of sucking as a clear mechanic without massive investment, and it really does make Winter Orb kind of have some of its clear potential back. However, it is not going to be a massive, 5-orb Delirium juicer like it has maybe had access to being in the past. It's not going to be a Simulacrum farmer for the most part, but it is going to be a pretty beefy, defensive, really high power clearing build for general mapping purposes. It's kind of like a little bit like Corrupting Fever in that way. It's kind of not got mega dam, it's got not insane scaling in terms of explode or anything like that, but it is going to be a pretty damn good normal mapping kind of a build. And it's fresh, it's new, it's got that Winter Orb playstyle that so many people love, and it's got the Herald of Ice MTX juiciness. So overall, pretty damn good. There's a few different ascendancies people are playing this Winter Orb build on. There's this one here, which is Palsteron's build. He's a YouTuber, you should check him out. He just put out a video on this build. He's playing it as a Scion to get access to crit, Slayer Leech, and overall quite a defensive version of this build. There's people playing it on a Cultist to take the increased AoE with Power Charge stacking to get really massive overlaps on Winter Orb, as well as massive Herald of Ice chains. There's people playing it on Assassin to get consistent crits on their Herald of Ice and really get the chains consistent and nice. And then there's also people playing it on Raider here for maximum movement speed, easy access to stuff like spell suppression, and overall quite more defense. So overall, Scion and Raider more on the defense side of things. If you want big AoE, big damage, it's like a Cultist and Assassin. So there's lots of different ways you can take this build, but they're all using this Omniscience Annihilating Light combo, and a lot of them are using Black Sun Crest. Overall, it's a pretty interesting newcomer, and it could be something that could be your next build. All right, let's move on to the next one here. Righteous Fire. So a traditional old skill coming back to the forefront here. Righteous Fire has popped up as one of the premier clear builds many times in the past, and then it's come, it's gone, it's faded, it's come. Overall, it is something that constantly comes in and out of the meta, depending on the actual overall power level of the kind of ignite and, burning damage archetype. But it's fair to say it's come back to the forefront once again, with many people rolling the RF build once again. The question is why? What are the new additions it's gotten, and why is it more powerful now? Well, people are just getting their teeth sunk into RF from my perspective, but the main thing that people are eyeing off as the big game changer is the buff to Legacy of Fury. So overall, a similar issue with RF as Winter Orb is they don't really have any big clearing mechanics like the big, attack-based builds like Lightning Arrow and stuff like that have. But Legacy of Fury is that clearing mechanic. With the buff, it kind of really does help you chain the packs and like lots of monsters blowing up, instead of just like, you having to melt each monster individually. Legacy of Fury will actually give you that big chunky so you like kill one monster and you get the domino effect, which is quite nice. In addition to that, you also do have access to some new Eldritch crafts, which are going to really make your itemization quite a lot easier. It's much easier to get that maximum fire res, which you need to make your RF infinitely sustainable and also make your character quite tanky. And then also the massive new unique jewels, which this player here isn't specifically using, the Forbidden Flesh and Flame, gives you massive opportunities on Occultist or Elementalist Righteous Fire. So if you're playing either of these, you can now easily make your Ignite, scale off of an Explosion Profane Bloom, which is particularly powerful because if you get a Profane Bloom to explode and ignite everything around it, you can easily chain entire screens and off screens with that combo as an RF build. Now, I haven't seen too many people experimenting with this yet, but I imagine it is a potential direction people might go in. Some big names to look at, for people playing RF is Captain Lance as well as Pox. Those guys are both playing RF this league, I believe, and overall RF is stronger than ever, and it is going to be a reasonable build to look into. However, it's not on the big boy list. It's definitely still in its experimental phase, and there's no build guides or really tried and true ways to build this just yet. And it's not going to be shredding up the Simulacrums or the Delirium mirror anytime soon, from what I can see, but it is a pretty reasonable mapper. It's going to smash out some T16s and blow up some legions. Overall, it looks pretty damn good. All right, okay, so that's going to be it with the kind of, not maximum tier content builds, kind of the big boys, maybe one day. Well, let's get into the actual big boys table though. The builds that are absolutely smashing endgame, blowing through everything. Delirium mirrors, 100% deli, simulacrums, 5 ways, this sort of territory. Let's get into the builds doing that kind of content, shall we? All right, so next up, we have Corrupting Fever. So this is my account, but you go ahead and take a look on PoE Ninja and see many, many other Corrupting Fever tornado shot builds. Overall, it's a build that gained a lot in the expansion, and it is also using one of the premier clear skills, Tornado Shot. So overall, it's going to have some of the best clear in the game, and it's also got some very, very respectable defense with 100% suppression, 100% avoid ailments, 50k armor with the flask up, as well as quite a large life pool. Overall, pretty damn strong. And it's got some damage to boot, almost getting up to around 10 mil, which is more than enough to do Delirium Mirror kind of content, as well as all the endgame in the game, which is pretty damn good. It's also going to do what RF, Winter Orb, and the Herald of Thunder kind of bomber does, really, really strong at low investment mapping or, non-deli content. But the thing that makes this build pretty damn good is the budget. So when we get into some of the builds in a second here, the budget is like whatever you want it to be. But this build kind of caps out really at what you're seeing here. It's got a very easily self-craftable set of gear that you can make right now. It's got a synthesized ring with vulnerability on hit, and it's got a few uniques which are pretty damn easy to acquire. Overall, the clusters aren't too expensive, and the most expensive thing on this build is just whatever belt you want to use. You can use the Stygian, or you can use the Mage Blood or the Headhunter. Overall, that's what kind of sets this build apart from some of the things we're about to see in a second here. But overall, it's kind of like the gateway juicer. It's not going to be as powerful as some of the really strong builds, but it is also going to have respectable clear, respectable delirium clear, and overall, it's not at a massive price tag. So it's definitely a pretty good build to build towards if you're not ready to go ahead and start farming up some mirrors. So pretty damn good, not too bad. I can definitely recommend it. It's quite nice, and it is what I'm actually playing right now. Alright, let's get onto the big boy table. These are the builds which you can essentially just pick a number and invest as much as you want into these builds. You can keep going until you get like mirror tier on every slot, and it will still keep scaling your character. It's very, very powerful. Overall, there is no limit to how much you can invest in these, and they are very, very strong for that reason. Okay, so first up we have Lightning Strike, one of the tried, the true, the staple builds of the game. Everyone seems to have converged and now agree that Omniscience is the way to build Lightning Strike moving forward. It is way too powerful to give up. It solves all of your defensive issues with, itemization, and it also gives you massive damage to boot, making it one of the most powerful build-around items the game's ever seen. So what's really strong about this is, of course, being able to just chuck on attributes on your tree, on your clusters, on your gear, and turn that into damage. Now, I'm not saying this is the perfect build here. here, but Crouching Tuna, for example, has put out a pretty good build guide for Lightning Strike using Omniscience, and I'm pretty sure Kobe Black Mamba has also done some Omniscience Lightning Strike on the Berserker side of things. There's two different ways you can play. The Berserker is high maintenance but more damage, and the Raider is more, low maintenance but way less damage but more defense. So overall, you just pick your poison. Both are good, but it's fair to say Lightning Strike is a staple. It's good for all content. You can do Wave 30 Simulacrum with enough investment. You can smash Delirium Mirrors. You can do 5 Orb Delirium, and you can do every boss in the game fairly effortlessly, assuming your character is up to snuff. You can do a ton of stuff with this build, and overall it is by far one of the strongest endgame builds on the table right now, and it is something you should definitely be looking into if you're interested in the Lightning Strike kind of play style. Banger of a build. All right, moving on. Not newcomer, but the redeemed build, and that is bows. So bows, previously, if you're a follower of this channel, I am an avid bow enjoyer, and bows have kind of been relegated to a very niche spot in past leagues of basically needing multiple mirrors to even get started, and then not even being good even after that, really. They've had massive problems with itemization, with resistances they just can't get to, and with damage that just really isn't that good. Well, this one amulet, which we've talked so much about, Omniscience, pretty much solves it all. And also the bow buff is welcome too. But also Eldritch items have massively improved the defense and quality of life of bow builds. So this is Crouching Tuna's profile here, but there's plenty of other profiles that you can take a look at. There's two trails of thoughts with Omniscience bows. Let me introduce both of them and their pros and cons, so you guys can have a pretty good idea of which way you want to go to. But first, to contrast this and compare this to Lightning Strike, I would consider Lightning Strike a more defensive version of bows, but at the cost of clear and overall clear speed. But you get more defense, you get to use a shield, and you overall are a little bit tankier. Now bows sacrifice that shield for more clear, more speed, and in some cases more damage, which is pretty damn good. Now, let's talk about the two variants though. So, the one we're seeing in the background here is a physical-based Omniscience bow build. Now, the only real difference between the two that we're about to talk about, physical and pure elemental, is their budget, as well as, overall what they excel at. So, let's talk about the pure elemental first though. So, this bow is a physical bow, but a pure elemental bow will feature all three elements. It'll feature cold, lightning, and fire for its prefixes, as well as some reasonably good suffixes. And overall, that's pretty damn strong and not too hard to get your hands on, making it a lot cheaper to get started with a elemental based tornado shot or lightning arrow build using Omniscience. Now, contrast that to physical. Physical costs infinitely more. You're probably going to have to go ahead and buy a 100x bow to even come close to what elemental has to offer. And in addition to that, overall, it's just much harder to access the materials to even get started crafting your bow compared to elemental. Well, overall, okay, so elemental just sounds better, right? It's got reasonably similar damage, and the bow is way easier to make, and the rest of the gear is pretty much the same, right? Well, yes, you're pretty much completely right, with one exception, and that is when you're getting into high-end content. If you're planning on putting on a headhunter, or you're planning on doing delirium, or any sort of stuff associated with high-end juicing, so the 5-way, legion farming, or anything like that, physical absolutely blows elemental out of the water. But before then, they're pretty similar, but elemental is far, far cheaper. But when you get into high-end delirium content or anything where Headhunter shines, physical is the king. And that is due to the fact that Headhunter offers a suite of increased damage modifiers which are exclusive to physical-based builds, making physical bows the premier pick for endgame versions of this build. But if you're just getting into it, you might want to go with elemental. Don't invest too much. Don't go and mirror an elemental damage bow, for example, because it's just not as good as physical when you get to the endgame. But overall, elemental is a good way to start. Now, the rest of the gear is going to be fairly the same due to the fact that it all features the same things that you need, due to the fact Omniscience is fairly, generic. So all of your gear is essentially going to have attributes as well as, defensive modifiers, which all are things that bows desperately needed and now have solved with the new Eldritch gear and Omniscience. So you can get all your resistances and a lot of your damage from just getting, double attributes on all of your gear. You can finally get big life rolls and movement speed speed, and even suppression on a lot of your pieces to kind of round it out, which is pretty damn nice. And overall, it's going to make for a very defensive character. In terms of defense, what we're talking here, assuming you can get your hand on a Master Surgeon set of Forbidden Jewels, we're talking more defense than the Corrupting Theater Gladiator that we were talking about earlier as one of the more defensive options. So let's talk a little bit about how the defense works. So overall, this build does feature quite a large amount of armor using Determination. It features a respectable amount of evasion with Grace and the Evasion Flask. Some people don't run Grace, but it's up to you. But the main defensive mechanic, which Rangers gain access to and Lightning Strike can also use, is the Forbidden Flame and Flesh combo, giving you Master Surgeon. So you'll see a lot of high-end bow builds and some lightning strike builds use this modifier here. Gain 7 charges when you are hit by an enemy. Now, when you have a Master Surgeon set of jewels here, whenever your flasks activate, you will gain a percentage of your life. And whenever you get hit, you're getting a ton of flask charges. And these builds all spec into gaining additional flask charges. And you'll notice, used when charge is full. So when all of your flasks fill up, they'll all fill and hit the point of being used and then heal you for a massive amount of your life. And when you get hit, you generate more of these charges, essentially giving you the modifier which most builds on hardcore try and get for on shields, X% of life when blocked. But it's whenever you're hit. You don't even have to block anymore, and it triggers off your flasks, all at the cost of 2 jewels. It's incredibly defensive, and it makes it one of the better Delirium mirror farmers, because you don't get killed in one hit. Well, you're just going to instantly full heal all that damage back in a lot of cases. You can stand in stuff like Cyrus beams and all sorts of stuff using this combo. Now, all rangers have access to this. It's just down to whether or not you want to invest your flask mods in it or invest your money in it. So overall, pretty damn good. Both the Lightning Strike and the Bow Omniscience builds are absolutely insane. If you're looking at the low end kind of things, go for Flat Elemental, but on the high end of things, it's pretty hard to beat Physical for high end content. All right, let's move on to the next one here. Okay, so this one is a bit of an interesting one. I'm not too experienced with this build specifically, but I do understand the general concept, and it would be criminal for me not to mention it. So we're talking about the Strength Stacker here. So the Strength Stacker is one of the best builds by far. It can smash Delirium content. It's a strong standalone build capable of doing all content as well. And, you know, overall, it's got all the hallmarks of a powerhouse. Overall, it revolves around the Alberon's Warpath replica boots here, which give you a ton of flat chaos damage per 80 strength. In addition to that, you also gain a massive amount of strength benefits from the rest of your gear, focusing on making that strength number as high as possible. The skill of use here is Venom Gyre. So Venom Gyre is kind of like playing Ethereal Knives without the Threshold Jewel, but it is very, very powerful. Overall, it's one of the better Simulacrum farmers, and it's definitely a powerhouse in the department of Delirium and just general mapping in general. It might not be as fast as like an Omniscience bow build in terms of the actual clear speed, but it certainly packs a punch, has massive damage, and even has pretty damn good defense, being able to get up to 100% suppression, a really high amount of armor here, and a reasonable life total. Overall, making it quite a reasonable pick. Overall, I personally would go with an Omniscience bow build or Lightning Strike build, but I also have to respect the absolute power on offer here from Strength Stackers. So you should definitely look into this if you're kind of liking the kind of strength kind of playstyle, and if you like the look of a Venom Gyre build. If you're looking to kind of look at some of the Venom Gyre action, you can check out Kobe Black Mamba's YouTube channel or Twitch. I think he is playing this one specifically. I forgot to mention, if you're looking to look into Tornado Shot or Lightning Arrow Omniscience builds, the build people to look out for that are Somad for Flat Elemental and Crouching Tuna for Physical bows, I believe. Those are the two kind of people I would look. I'm going to put all these names in the description below. But Strength Stacker, definitely a strong one on the list. And lastly, I just had to put it on here for the meme value, Aurastacker. So Aurastacker is alive, it's well in many different forms, but the one I have on show here is the Smite Dream Feather version, which massively takes advantage of huge armor from Determination, and overall it's going to be quite powerful. Now this build doesn't have a Mage Blood on it, but you could easily go ahead and grab one and put that on there and double its damage, but this build specifically, and all Aurastackers pretty much, are experts at doing Simulacrum, as well as, you know, high-end game content like the feed and stuff like that. Overall, they boast some of the highest and most ridiculous defenses, and with gear, you can get some of the most damage in the game out of an Aurastacker. I just thought I'd want to point out here that it is alive, it's well, and it's still ridiculous due to the existence of Ashes of the Stars, juicing up all of their alt quality auras even more. They just can't keep a good build down, can they? So yeah, Aurastacker alive, well, the best version I've seen so far is the Armour Stacker using Replica Dream Feather. However, this one does use Doriani's prototype to start dropping some auras. So for example, you no longer need to run Purity of Lightning or Purity of Fire due to the fact that you can just run Purity of Ice, get a ton of max cold res, and then use the new Melody of the Flesh Cobalt Jewel here to make all of your res still 90%. And then this build specifically foregoes lightning resistance due to Doriani's prototype, getting massive negative lightning resistance on the Melody of the Flesh, as well as Threaded Hope here, getting a massive damage multiplier from Doriani's prototype, and obviously still being able to mitigate all that lightning damage using the massive amount of armor they have, 800k, to kind of really get past that downside. Overall, Aurastacker is still alive, it's well, but it does die to lightning damage over time, so you're going to have to watch out for that if you play this build specifically. But overall, it's a pretty good pick if you enjoy Simulacrum and high-end Delirium content, and you can avoid lightning damage over time builds. So overall, there is also the Spark version of this, which I'm sure boasts just as equally insane defenses and offense, but this is kind of going to wrap up my overall look at the endgame meta. I know I might have left out a few powerful builds, but I tried to get to everything. Stuff like Cast on Crit really hasn't popped up as a big one just yet, but I imagine it might in the future. And please let me know if I've missed any big builds here on this list which aren't included, as I'll, try and make a follow-up video with them maybe in the future. But overall, that's my take on it. Hopefully you found something interesting in this video that you might want to work towards and craft towards. Until next time, cheers.